sacrifices to killing a god. Ares, Zeus, Athena. I love bearded dads in video games. It's not a secret. I have Kratos, Joel Miller from The Last of Us, and Geralt of Rivia from The Witcher 3 on my wall. And there's plenty of other iconic dads to draw from Lee of The Last of Us to Barrett of Final Fantasy VII. Hell, I'll even give Sam from Death Stranding a nod even though he has a baby beard, because he spends the entire game with a full-on baby infant strapped to his chest, and if that's not dad vibes, I don't know what is. If you've got a game about a bearded dad, especially if he is a certified badass, grumpy as hell, somewhat emotionally distant, but still a good person doing his best to connect with his child and protect them from the evils of the world, then you've got my attention. That's my jam, and I'll eat it by the jarful. Especially if, despite bungling it up and not knowing how to navigate his own traumatically scarred past, bearded dad guy still does everything in his power to keep his child person safe, and how to hopefully become a better person than he himself is along the way. Yeah, that's pretty much the equivalent of video game Oscar bait for me. Having said that, I'm going to tell you right here, right now, right this very second, that anything I have to say about God of War is going to be completely biased. All right, I acknowledge my faults, I acknowledge my limitations, and let's face it, there's no way I'm going to be in any way neutral about this. But honestly, who even cares? Daddy Kratos, the god of beard, is back, baby! This is an impressions video, which means I haven't finished God of War Ragnarok yet. I'll do a more thorough, complete review of Ragnarok once I finish the game to its completion, but I wanted to get my thoughts of my initial impression of the game out here now, because God of War 2018 was such a fantastic game to me, and so far at least, Ragnarok is shaping up to head in that same direction and possibly surpass it. Just note that whatever I say here is not representative of a completed playthrough. There is still plenty of chances that my opinion on the game will change as more unfolds. The whole game could end up falling apart, although let's be honest, it's pretty unlikely that Santa Monica Studios is going to end up fucking up God of War so spectacularly as to ruin the entire game partway through. But you know what? I've said the same thing about other games before, and somehow they manage that big of a fumble, so I'm not going to say it's impossible. But it is really unlikely, and they would have to fuck up majorly. Also note that there will be spoilers for the first several hours of the game. I'm not going to cover every single moment or anything like that, but there will be plenty of visual looks at the first couple of hours, and I am going to dive into some story-centric moments that I thought really set the bar for my opinion of what the game is so far. So if you're sensitive to that kind of stuff, definitely don't check this out right now. Come back and watch the video after you've played the first couple hours of God of War Ragnarok at least, or if you just don't care, then proceed ahead and see what we've got. With all that official bullshit out of the way, is God of War Ragnarok good? Before we dive into the answer to that question, I'm going to address a few things I've been hearing here and there. Some people have said God of War Ragnarok is just a glorified God of War 2018 DLC. I've heard some gripes that it hasn't innovated enough, that it feels just like playing 2018, that there hasn't been enough done with the visuals and capabilities of the game, that there are a lot in the game, elements, characters, and environments that we saw in 2018 making return appearances. Having played a decent bit of the opening hours of Ragnarok, if I'm honest, I can see the perspective those arguments are coming from. I just think that that perspective is weak as fuck and packed full of small peanut energy, but also a little bit understandable. God of War 2018 was a massive shift from the original God of War trilogy. Everything from the pacing and style of storytelling to the setting and mythology and the gameplay itself was completely changed and shifted in fundamental ways that left the game almost unrecognizable from its predecessors. The change was so striking, so extensive, so all-encompassing that I think the change from its roots itself became as big a part of people's memories and experiences of God of War 2018 as the actual game. This is not the case at all with God of War Ragnarok. Ragnarok very much follows in the footsteps of God of War 2018, seamlessly in fact. The setting, the characters, the gameplay all flow smoothly from one entry to another, giving a feel of direct continuation from the last outing in the series. 3 years have passed since the events of God of War 2018, but it feels like that game may as well have been yesterday for how easily we pick up right where 2018 left off. And I think for some people, there was an expectation for this game to pack the sort of jolting, attention-grabbing change and shift that so strongly characterized God of War 2018 when compared to the original trilogy. If this was the expectation, then yeah, you're going to find Ragnarok a bit of a letdown, because it quite simply is not that drastic reframing of what 2018 offered, but rather a deliberate continuation of that game's story and experience. There's been some complaints that I've seen here and there about the graphical and technical performance of this game and it not being a significant leap forward. There is a crumb, and I do mean a crumb, of validity to that argument. While I'm not knocking the visuals of the game by any means, I do think that Ragnarok could have benefited from being designed specifically from the PlayStation 5 exclusively. It's hard to argue that Ragnarok being designed with the PlayStation 4 in mind and what it was capable of delivering and performing, rather than exclusively what the next-gen PS5 could have delivered, didn't limit the game on some scale. There's just some things that the PS5 can deliver at this point that the PlayStation 4 can't. And although we haven't seen many cases of a game coming out exclusively for the PlayStation 5 that truly delivered that next-gen experience, all you have to do is look at something like Demon's Souls Remake, Ratchet & Clank, or Returnal to see, yes, there is a difference between the PS4 and PS5, and it's going to make a tangible difference if you can't just gear it exclusively for next-gen. That said, I think that God of War Ragnarok did push the PS4 to its absolute breaking point. It pulled out every last molecule of performance that the PS4 was capable of, and even if it wasn't a massive leap forward, technically speaking, it is undeniable that God of War Ragnarok is extremely high quality in its production, especially running on the PlayStation 5 where it really hits its full stride. The art direction and creativity are as captivating as anything that's come out of the talented Santa Monica studios, and even early into the game there are many awe-inspiring sights on offer for Ragnarok. Sweeping vistas, creative creatures, colossal monstrosities, and plenty of spellbinding visual effects to bring the battles to life. But even if saying all that does away with a bit of the unnecessary naysaying going on, it really doesn't answer that all-important question. Is God of War Ragnarok good? And yeah, God of War Ragnarok is good. But even if God of War Ragnarok is good, maybe more important is sussing out the essence of why is it good. Because it has Kratos and Boy, and they're back, baby. And Boy is an old boy now. And he's got a sassy teenage attitude. And Kratos is trying to be a good dad, but he's still got that dog in him. And we get to see Atreus' mom, sort of. And Freya's back, and boy is she pissed. And they've even got some good boys, but the goodest boy of all is dead, and that's sad, and Atreus gets all broken up about it. But then Atreus turns into a motherfucking bear, and this all goes down in less than an hour. There is so much happening. In the original God of War trilogy, every game opened in a grand spectacle of action, big set pieces, crazy battles, and boss fights, each opening topping the last to set the tone and pace of this huge, larger-than-life adventure that Kratos and the players would embark on together, challenging gods and demigods and titans and everything in between. God of War 2018 took a step back and gave us an intro that was deliberately slower and more methodical, as well as more intimate and thoughtful, as we saw Kratos we almost didn't recognize. Ragnarok appears to be following in this slow, thoughtful introduction, but then Freya shows up and she's like, nah, fuck you, no peace, only war! This back and forth shifting between a somber and thoughtful look at Kratos and Atreus, who they are and who they are becoming, and how they continue to maintain and strengthen their bond during all of this, continuously contrasts with bigger, bolder, more bombastic moments and encounters that amp up the intensity well beyond what we expect experienced in God of War 2018. We still have the intimacy and character-driven exchanges that made up so much of the heart and soul of God of War 2018, but now with rapidly elevating stakes and impactful events unfolding around our father-son duo. While we have these moments like Kratos dreaming of Faye or Atreus dealing with the loss of his favorite wolf, we also have the very early introduction to the main antagonist of Thor and Odin popping up only about 2 hours or so into the game, amping up the stakes and tension. And not only do they show up, but then we get a huge battle with Thor that is very reminiscent of our first fight and encounter with Baldur. Only it's even bigger and crazier, and Kratos and Thor have an "I'm a better dad than you" fight.
Modi sought us in fear of you. He died of the wounds you gave him. Oh, we got a model father here.
And they make a giant tree out of frozen lightning. And at one point in this giant crazy battle, Thor even breaks the fourth wall and restarts your heart with Mjolnir.
Oh no. I say when we're done. I'm not leaving till I see the real you.
Ragnarok just started. It has no business going this hard this early. I'm seriously gonna need Santa Monica Studios to calm the fuck down, okay? If some people seem to think that this game needs to be a drastic reconstruction of God of War the way 2018 was and felt like Ragnarok was too much of the same, I felt the total opposite. Playing through what I've done so far in Ragnarok felt like slipping on my favorite, familiar, comfortable pair of gloves. Combat flowed in the same way as 2018 with enough small tweaks and refinements to come together even better, but also feeling like a perfect continuation of the systems and gameplay elements that made the last entry so satisfying to play. Exploration of levels follow much of the same steps as 2018, but with some additions to navigation and area traversal, particularly in employing the Blades of Chaos and the chains in a way that will likely feel satisfyingly familiar to fans of the original Greek trilogy. Likewise, characters and their development and interactions continue the trends of the last game with additional fleshing out of relationships and interactions to reflect the shifting of our familiar cast over the last 3 years between games. Kratos is the same gruff, brooding, but thoughtful god of the last game with a renewed focus not only on protecting his son, but also teaching him and fostering a more nurturing bond. Atreus has grown into a teenager. He has shed much of both his innocence and his petulance from his younger years, giving way to a young man that is in turn rebellious, headstrong, and dutiful, always swiveling between straining at the leash of his father's control while also trying harder to be in control of himself. Mimir makes his return as well, offering the same sage wisdom, wily commentary, and compelling storytelling that breathes so much life and depth into the world of myths and gods and legends of the Norse we find ourselves exploring. The way these elements maintain consistency and build seamlessly on the foundation God of War 2018 laid out wasn't a letdown to me. Rather, it made the game immediately familiar, comfortable, and engaging, letting me become fully engrossed and ready for the next development rather than having to spend a moment orienting to new changes. While Ragnarok adheres to its predecessor as faithfully as possible, there's no shortage of new spectacles, twists, events, and expansion to lore, settings, and experiences to pour through, keeping everything to come fresh and engaging. Enemies and bosses are already more varied in the beginning phases of the game than the majority of God of War 2018 combined, and after the initial opening you immediately jump to another realm apart from Midgar that allows you to navigate a sizable map in the iconic rowboat with a plentiful range of optional destinations to visit, kill, and loot. Instead of your opening side quests mostly consisting of conversing with the spirits of the dead to run and do fetch or monster slaying quests for, the first few side quests delve into the mistakes of Mimir's past, giving meaningful objectives that tie to both exploration and a central character backstory and history. We even get to free a massive imprisoned whale so huge that an entire explorable island sits upon its back, and this too is tied to the sins of Mimir's past that we never learn learned of in 2018. Brock and Sindri reprise their roles as the rambunctious and argumentative brother blacksmiths, and the cast of characters are expanded to several new faces, including a surly dwarf with a squid for a pet and a big enough attitude to talk smack to the god of war himself. Combat remains fast-paced, flexible, and challenging. I've been playing on Give Me No Mercy, which is slightly more forgiving than the same difficulty in God of War 2018, which I imagine is a solid difficulty for most players, offering a decent challenge without being incredibly punishing. Ragnarok maintains a pretty close to 2018 experience in terms of battles and how to play through them, while introducing some small changes such as charging up extra elemental damage into the Blades of Chaos or the Leviathan Axe, and giving you a richer variety of environmental interactions that you can make use of to either directly attack enemies or use to reposition for a more advantageous engagement. Atreus takes up his role of support much as he did in God of War 2018, attacking from range with various elemental arrows. He likewise will become more directly involved, wading into the fray and using his bow for melee attacks in tandem with your own to deal additional damage and further stagger whatever enemy Kratos is focusing on. It isn't wildly different from how he handled back in 2018, but there is a bit more variety to his involvement now, which is both functionally damaging, distracting, and serves to flesh out the feel of Kratos and Atreus working together as a team. Like most elements of the game, the combat in Ragnarok does a fantastic job of hitting that sweet, elusive spot between continuing what worked so well and introducing enough small but meaningful changes to keep things fresh and engaging. You only have to take one look at all of this to know that unless Santa Monica Studios royally fucked this game up, I was going to fall in love with God of War Ragnarok. Still, I would like to think even if I were able to be fully objective, which obviously I can't, that I would still be loving God of War Ragnarok because so far at least, from everything I've experienced, it's just a good game. It takes all the strong, enjoyable, endearing points of God of War 2018 and it amps them up, adding to it in subtle, small ways that doesn't feel like a rapid departure, but is certainly a steady escalation. I have no doubt that while it will stay true to many elements that we love so well from the God of War series, especially 2018, there will be plenty of twists, turns, and mind-blowing moments to come. I'll be back with a more thorough exploration of God of War Ragnarok once I have finished the game in full, so make sure you subscribe and turn your notifications on to check out more future Ragnarok videos. Until next time, stay salty, nerds.
Ready!
Good night!
Together! That one was tough.